All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be with you all. My name's Zachary. I'm filling in for Mike today. He's preoccupied today. He has a little early Christmas present that I think he's enjoying today. So you guys get me for a substitute. But today we're going to be in Genesis for Bible class. Now, I'm not sure how Mike typically does Bible class or how you guys typically do it, if you are more discussion or just lecture. So we'll see how far into it we get. We'll either get through a ton or just a few verses. But I figured Genesis was a good place to start when I was talking with Gary about today. He told me that it's free range. I could talk about whatever I wanted to. I figured I'd narrow that down to the Bible, figure something in the Bible out to talk about. And I was thinking about, well, what to talk about. And, this is our first time meeting. Good to talk about beginnings, about new starts. And so what better place to talk about Genesis? And where better to start than the beginning? So let's go ahead. I'll read it for you guys, chapter 1 here, and we'll see how much further than chapter 1 we get. But we'll start in chapter 1. And as I read through it, let's just focus on any patterns that we see, any things that are kind of repetitive, and then anything that breaks those patterns, and we'll just talk about the text today. I'll go ahead and read it for you guys, starting in verse 1, Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds according to their own seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day, over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. After our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and to have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. All right, so there we have chapter 1. I'll take a pause there. Now, I was thinking about where to go, and I know I wasn't really able to send out material for today's class to give you guys proper time to prepare thoughts, but that's partly why I chose Genesis, because I think it's one of those texts that we all probably know fairly well. It's one that even if you weren't raised in the church, it's something that most people know, the story, the creation story. It's the start of it's the very fabric for everything we believe. And so hopefully that will help lend it to you guys, and hopefully you can use that previous knowledge to your favor. But what are some of the patterns we see here? What are some of the things that are really focused on and repeated time and time again?
God said when he made things, everything was good. It was perfect.
Yeah.
In the beginning. So when he made the light and the earth and the animals, the only problem is when man gets involved in it. Then everything kind of messes up. But
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me, if we have supercomputers and we can speak into the computers and have things made,
Mm-hmm.
God didn't have computers.
No.
He just spoke. We didn't speak into anything. He just said, let there be, and it works.
Yeah, so absolutely. You got a couple of things there, right? One, it really is quite astonishing that the show of power that God is giving us here. He didn't have any tools. Every time it just says he spoke, and it was so. He spoke, and it was so. So powerful that his words created everything that we know, and that is really astonishing. And then the other thing you said was that every time it was good. It's repeated time and time again. It was good. It was good. And verse 31 there at the end, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, a little break in the pattern there with the extra adjective or descriptor there. It was very good. It was very good. Before man, as you say, as we'll get into that, kind of muddled everything up. He created it, and he created it perfectly. Yeah.
And he also said on the animals and stuff like that, he also said multiply after their own kind.
Yes.
But he didn't say that about man.
Yeah. We get in the creation of both animals and plants. It's there's a lot of words about multiply in your own kind, right? Seeds of its own kind, bearing fruit of its own kind. But I would say that we somewhat see that a little bit, but it's a little bit kind of behind the scenes when we see the creation of man. Although he says, be fruitful and multiply, he doesn't add the of its own kind. But he does say something when he creates man. What's different about when he creates man versus how he creates animals? He uses a very specific word there when he says, blessed, and let us create man in our image. And so it's kind of to that point, right? He's creating all these animals and these plants and these trees, and he's saying, let them each be of their own kind. And then he specifically calls out man, and he says, this is like my kind, in my likeness. And when you are being fruitful and you're multiplying, just like the animals should be, we're creating in not of our kind, not of our seed, but of God's seed. We're following that pattern of God we're made in his likeness, and we're continuing his fruits, his seed, his creation. Yeah, that's a great point. Any other patterns or just kind of oddities that are popping out to you? I will say that is another interesting point. They're bringing up the fact that God specifically calls out the animals to be fruitful and multiply. I heard it a lot growing up that the first commandment in the Bible, the first commandment, it was be fruitful and multiply. And it's always funny when you read back these texts that you think you know so well, and you're going back through them and you're like, how did I never know that? How did I skip over that every time? It's interesting that his first command is not to man. Really, the first command is let there be light. But when he's talking to his creation, his first command is to the animals. He says to his animals, to those creations, be fruitful and multiply. Now, if you're looking at that text, if we see in verse 21, verses 20 down, it starts talking about God created the birds. He started creating the sea creatures and everything that crawled on the earth. And he said in verse 22, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters in the seas and let the birds multiply on the earth. He tells man something very similar, right? He says, be fruitful and multiply. But how does his command to us differ there? Subdue it. Subdue it. That's kind of interesting, right? Again, I think he's calling out to man that you're set apart, you're different. Not only are you not supposed to multiply in your own likeness, you're supposed to multiply due to my kind, in my likeness, but also I'm setting you apart and giving you dominion to subdue what I've created. Yes?
When you look at that, everything was created in order.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the animals, because where would you put them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you gotta have land and water for the animals and for the, the trees and birds and everything. So in correct, I say correct, of course God knows, in the order it should be, you gotta have them, put the cows and horses here and birds here and the water and things like that. He didn't go haphazard, like sometimes we do things haphazard.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Do it in order.
Yeah, that's a very good point about order there. And I think it's one of the biggest themes that we read in Genesis is this idea of order and how God creates and what God does in his creation. And I would say it even goes into verse 2, right? Verse 1, it's one of the most well-known verses in the whole Bible, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then in verse 2, we get this interesting kind of addition to it. The earth was without form and void. The darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And another pattern that I think I see in this when I'm reading it is that for a creation story, for God telling us how he made everything, it seems just a little vague to me, right? It's not like he says, and on the third day I created Newton's third law of thermodynamics, and this is exactly how the whole universe is supposed to work, and these are the laws of mathematics and physics that I defined perfectly and beautifully. No, he just says, I created light. I created the land that you walk on. I created life. But here in verse 2, it gets kind of oddly specific. It leaves that pattern of slight vagueness. And I think it's to that point of order, right? I would argue that whenever you start seeing this idea of waters, especially in the Old Testament, but all the way through the New Testament, it's meant to represent this image of chaos, right? Think about Moses, right? Moses is leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and what gets in their way? The Red Sea. And so God has to divide it. He has to subdue the waters, has to subdue this chaotic force to make it so that man could pass through it. Think of Jonah, right? He's overtaken in this storm. Think of even the Israelites heading into Canaan. They have to cross through Jordan, and they can't do it without God subduing that chaotic nature. And we see it all the way into the New Testament with what we see the disciples a few times on the waters. It's this chaotic force. It's something to be feared. And what does God say? What does Jesus say? He subdues it. He says, I have power over these things. And what we read here is the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And what did he do? He created order. He took this chaotic nature and he created order out of it. And I think that is a very important point, and it's a theme that we see throughout the entire Bible, is God taking these chaotic forces and turning it into something good for him, something that is meant to be ordered and proper, something that, as he would describe, is very good. That's a great point, and I think another good thing to bring up is the idea of order. What else? Are there any other patterns that are kind of sticking out to you guys? Yeah.
All I think about it is until he separated the day from the night and the night from the day, there was no span of time. It could have been billions of years up until that time.
Yeah.
Because there was no, that's when the day started, that's when time, like day started. And before then, there's no telling how much time it took him to create the world.
Well, and I think that tells us another awe-inspiring fact about God, right? Everything we know was created by God, even to the very fabric of our reality, right? Time and space itself, everything that we would think of as just facts of life, God created, meaning that he's outside of that. And it is truly incredible to think that there is a God out there that if he can create time, control all of these things, then he cared enough to create me and to create me in his likeness and his image, and to call me out for a specific purpose. Very good. I think those are all very interesting patterns that we see. We see that everything was good, right? We talked about that the day and the night. Another point to the idea of the day and night. This is repeated after each thing that God creates, right? He created light, and then there was day and there was night, and it was the first day, right? That same pattern was created time and time again. And I think that is kind of to get back to the very first thing that was brought up, which was when God created something, it worked as it should. Sure, man kind of, they messed up a little bit later on, but from the very first thing that God created, when he said, "Let there be light," it did exactly as he said. There was day and there was night. There was day and there was night. It repeats and repeats. Everything followed how God created it. A couple oddities, because I think focusing on the things that break pattern is just as important as focusing on the things that create the pattern in the text, right? And I think the two main things that break this pattern of the text are, one, as we talked about, this idea of the focus on creating peace, creating order out of chaos through verse 2 there. But two, it's the creation of man. God specifically made man to be different from his other creations. Now, what ways do we see God separating man from his creation, from his other creations?
Man can think. Some of them can. Some men can think.
Yeah, man can think, right? And that is a beautiful thought, that we're able to, a little bit scary, but the fact that God thought that was important for us to be able to think and to consider these things that he's given to us. How else did he create us different from his other creations?
I've only had one question about I've never questioned the Bible. I've never questioned God. But I often wonder, when did he start? And this says in the beginning. It never gives us, of course, we're not supposed to know it. I mean, I understand that. But when did he start?
Mm-hmm.
Like we work in time, like, 1st of December, 2nd of October. Did God start in January, February? What time did he start? He has no, I don't say concept. Time means nothing to him.
That's why I brought that up about there was no a lapse of time until he created. It could have been a trillion years, and time doesn't exist to God. He always has been and he always will be.
Well, and I would argue to that first point that what's going on here is it's in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It is vague. It doesn't say on the 1st of January God started and we move on, right? But I think it's meant to be vague. It's meant, really, I think if you believe the first 4 words of the Bible, then everything else follows suit after that. If you believe that in the beginning God, then everything else is possible. Then sure, God can send his son down to die for our sins. And then sure, God can do all these things. He can create life. He can give us everything that we know. He can give us eternal life. He can give us all these blessings in our life, as long as you believe those first 4 words. And it doesn't really matter when exactly that was. It doesn't matter any of the specific details, as long as you believe those first 4 words, that in the beginning, God.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it, and I never questioned it, but I often wonder just, when did everything start?
And those will definitely be great questions to understand one day, right? Yeah.
Genesis 1:1 back to school.
There you go.
Okay, this is the way I read it. The first day, there was nothing. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now he's going to talk about the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Okay, he's talking to it. He doesn't say a word about time. And then God said, "Let there be light." He separates the light from the dark, and then he says, "It's the first day." Genesis 1:1 tells you, one day God created the heavens and the earth, and he created the light. It's right there. First thing, he created the heavens and the earth.
It doesn't
It
say how
doesn't
much
say he
time.
created the heavens and the earth, and then he decided to go off and do something else.
Yeah, Shad.
I was gonna say the Hebrew word for the word day is yom, and that's also found in Genesis 7 verse 11 when it talks about Noah, and there's like a exact unit of time, and it's actually I'll read it. It says in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of that month. And so at that point there had been some sort of unit of time, and it's the same Hebrew word used for, and that was the first day, the 2nd day, the 3rd day.
Sure. Yeah, I thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely from this creation, God is creating time as we know it, right? And he's creating everything that we know. Let's move on a little bit from there, and we can start considering, I want to consider the context of this, because I think it's easy to look at the text as just like as like a single layer cake, right? We're just reading this and it happened and there we go. But really it's often quite layered, right? It's quite layered. There's tiers to it. We read this as fact, as this was history that happened. But then we can also consider, well, when it was written, who it was written to. Well, it was written to the Israelites. Moses was writing it down through the Holy Spirit, with God writing this through him. And it was specifically written to the ancient Israelites. And of course, we now read it in a completely different context. And I think it's important to remember that first context of why God wanted these words to be the first ones that the Israelites heard from him. Because if you think about it, the Israelites had just been in Egypt, right? To kind of change gears a little bit here. The Israelites were in Egypt. They get taken out. God has just saved them through these plagues and taken them into the wilderness. And he's now saying, okay, let me show you who I am. Let me reveal myself to you. And I think it's very telling to know, you can tell a lot about someone by how they introduce themselves, right? About who they are, the few words. You can, perhaps they introduce themselves by their name, right? And then if it was me, I'd say, well, my name's Zachary. I'm a Christian. I'm from Colorado. I just moved to West Palm Beach. So you get to learn these little cues about a person in just the very first few words. And God especially is doing that very thing, and he's doing it very efficiently. And I think it's key to focus on what kind of characteristics he's trying to reveal about himself to the Israelites. What is he trying to teach the Israelites about himself through this text? And so I would ask you, as we read through Genesis chapter 1, what characteristics are apparent here? What is God telling us about himself? What are his traits? What are the traits that we see of God in this text? Omnipotent, yeah. We talked a little bit about his power and talking about time and all that. He is all powerful, right? What else?
He's similar to us.
He's similar to us. Yeah. We were created specifically to be like God. And so if we follow his order, we should know a fair bit about God, right? Just if we are following his rules and becoming as close to him, then we should know a fair bit about him. We were created in his image. What else?
Everything has a purpose and you're in control of it.
Everything has a purpose. It is kind of beautiful as you start reading these things. Each thing is told to do something specifically. It's let there be light, and the light was good, and there was day and night, right? It has a purpose. And the fish were told to multiply, that the trees, even that the plants were told to be of their own seed. And of course, we'll get into the implications for man with that too. Yeah.
Could you explain to me how there's a giant explosion, the earth cooled down, and everything that you just got through reading happened exactly like that? Because some science teachers I know will tell you that you had a big explosion, the earth cooled down, people came to little cells of monkeys and stuff. Now, how do you explain that, especially to the kids in here? How do you, they come home and say, the teacher said, the Bible's not right. We came from this and the earth exploded and everything. It's very difficult with young people and it's starting in schools, elementary schools, colleges and everything else.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to kind of the point about the vagueness of this text, right? So to give you a little bit about my history, I was not planning on being a preacher my whole life. I went to school to study engineering and physics specifically, and I got my degree in physics, where I studied a lot of the stuff and how the world was created, about how the laws of the universe were. And you asked me if I can explain it, and honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of it. I just studied to get through the test and then to finish and to get the little piece of paper, right?
It cannot be explained except it's wrong. It's definitely wrong.
And certainly, there's a lot of explanations out there. And I think as we read this, what's apparent is that I can tell you, as someone who has read a lot of scientific texts, this doesn't read like a scientific text, right? This reads quite differently. It reads like a personal letter, because that's what it is. It's a personal introduction of God saying, this is who I am, this is what you need to know. I mean, you bring up, how would we explain the rules of the universe to the little kids class? Well, how would you go back thousands of years and explain to ancient Israelites who had very little education, probably no education at all, how everything came to be? Well, you couldn't. And so why would God waste his time on that? He wants to focus on something very important, and it's saying, this is who I am. And I think we see a lot of characteristics in God through this. We see that he's a creator, right? We talked about how he not only creates good, but he creates order and peace and things that work as they should. We see that he cares for his creation. He's constantly checking in on it. After each day, when day and night goes, he looks at it and he says, all right, yes, this is good. After he creates each thing, he says, this is what you should do. Let's build you up in this. We see that he's a personal God. We see that as he creates man, that it's made in his likeness and his image. We see that he wanted to be, as he calls us to be, to do. He wanted to be fruitful and to multiply in his image. And it really is a beautiful text when we read it, I think, in that way, as a letter and not some explanation for how everything came about. Although I wouldn't. That's not me trying to say that I'm disputing what this is saying. In no way am I saying that. Yeah.
There's a saying amongst the churches of Christ that you speak when the Bible speaks and be silent when the Bible is silent.
Mm-hmm.
If God didn't specify that, there's a reason why he didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He gave us whatever he gave us, that's what he wanted to know. And that's the other stick on that.
Absolutely. I like that. Speak when the Bible speaks, be silent when the Bible is silent. There's this I'm a bit of a nerd, and so what I like to do is when I'm having troubles falling asleep, I will read these philosophical paradoxes to try to just put my mind to sleep. And it works quite well. If you ever have an issue sleeping, I'd suggest doing it. And there's this one that I find quite interesting. It's called the Mary's Room Paradox. It goes kind of like this. Imagine there's this girl named Mary, and she's trapped in this room, right? It's a black and white room. Everything in the room is black and white. But in this room, there's an infinite source of books, right? There's as many books as you could possibly imagine, but everything is black and white. Now, you tell Mary to study and to understand color, the idea of color, as she lives in this black and white world. And then she does that. She reads every book on color, and she understands it as to the fullest extent, right? But then you open the door, and you let her out of this room, and you show her an apple. Does she learn something when she sees the color red, when she sees the apple? If she was able to fully understand everything, then how does she take in more information when she sees the color? And I think this is it's very similar to our dilemma here that we face when we read, especially texts like this in the Old Testament. How are we supposed to know a God that created everything that we know, time and space itself, that created life itself? How are we supposed to know a God like that? Well, by faith and by starting with the words that he gave us. And I think that there is another way too. Well, the only way for Mary in that example to truly understand the color red, although she can read and read and read, is for her to see the color red, right? And God does this very thing with himself. He doesn't just make us read. One, he says, I created these things, and then we can look out and we can see them. Well, there's trees, right? Trees doing as they're supposed to, animals doing as they're supposed to, multiplying as they're supposed to. But two, he went above and beyond, coming to earth, showing us who he is, showing us his true nature, giving us his son, showing us what love truly looks like so that we can know him better. And then I think, Shad, you pointed this point out too. He also created us in his image. And so to know a God that is beyond understanding, he gives us this wonderful ability to kind of look within, to see if I follow what he tells me to do, then I will start bearing the fruits of God and be able to know him better, to see him better. Let's talk a little bit about the commands that God gives man. What are the commands that remind me real quick? What are the commands that God gives to man after creation? I'll pull it back up on the screen for you. Let's see. What were the commands that God gave man? Be fruitful and multiply. I heard it. What else? Yes, subdue and have dominion. And then, as we'll see in chapter 2, of course, he then gives one final command in this whole kind of creation story of don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But let's start with those first, and I'll say first 3 commands, right? I want to separate the idea of being fruitful, of multiplying, and then of subduing. Now, why say be fruitful and multiply, right? If God is truly trying to efficiently reveal himself to the Israelites, if he's trying to efficiently reveal himself to us, why take the extra time to almost redundantly use the same word? I would argue it's not redundant, right? So why use this second word, fruitful and multiply? What's the difference there?
Maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
I have a science brain as well. I think of a bounty when I think of fruitful. But you can have a bounty but not have it duplicated in all areas. Right? So I guess if you think of a bounty in all areas, that would be fruitful and multiply versus just having a bounty in a particular thing but not everything. So when I hear multiply, I think of everything.
Yeah.
You can have a bounty but it not be a bounty in all things.
Yeah. Well.
It's just an idea.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. We're just studying together, right? I like that a lot. The idea that not just grow, but grow in all ways. And as you multiply flourishingly, right? Kind of that idea that you're doing it well and properly and fully and completely. Definitely. What else? How about this to help? Are there any other times that come to mind where being fruitful is brought up in the Bible? For me, I think of, yeah?
Go ahead.
No, please.
Being growing as a Christian and being fruitful in that sense of yourself, like pruning back
Absolutely. Well,
man.
I think of Mark, and I'll turn there for you guys real quick. Mark 11, where we get a certain parable, one that is a bit odd when first approached, but it's Mark 11, verse 12, and I'll read it for you now. Mark 11, starting in verse 12. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry, he being Jesus. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. And then if we skip down a little bit, we get Jesus going into the temple and turning over the tables. But then we see after that, he leaves the temple and he approaches again this fig tree in verse 20. As they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also, who is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses." Now, this is a little bit out of context, but I'll try to add that back in for you guys. It's a weird text, right? Jesus comes across this fig tree. He sees that it doesn't have figs, and although he knows that it's not the season for figs, he curses it and says, "Don't ever have any more figs. Nobody's going to eat of your tree." And what's going on here is he's teaching direct lessons about the Pharisees that he will see in the temple here shortly after cursing the fig tree. What do we know about the Pharisees? Well, we know that they were the leaders, right, of the Jewish people at that time. We know that they, as Jesus calls out here pretty directly, that they like to pray in an honest way, in an unhonest way. But 3, despite them being multiplied, right, despite them having plenty of followers, they were not properly fruitful. And that's the whole point of this parable here with the fig tree. But it's also, I think, the point of this first command. God, from his very first command, wasn't just telling man to multiply, just have a bunch of babies and then go off and do your own thing. No, he's telling them to do exactly what he did. In verse 26, God said, Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Not just multiplying, but being fruitful in God's image. Just like how the trees were supposed to be fruitful in their own likeness, we are to be fruitful in God's likeness. And it's a good reminder for us that as we go through this life, that these commands weren't just given to us in the New Testament when Jesus came along and he said, remember to be fruitful, make disciples. From day one, God was telling us that as you go through life, be fruitful in your own life and in other people's lives. We don't have a ton of time left here, so I'll just kind of skip through a little bit, and we'll try to pull out just a couple more points before we're done for this morning. That third command, subdue the earth. have dominion over the earth. I think, again, it is calling our minds to exactly what God did. We talked about God creating order out of chaos earlier, right? Well, that's what he was doing. He was subduing his creation. He was making sure that it followed his order. And again, God is telling man to do just what he did. And it's another pattern that pops up here. God creates man and he tells them to do as I do. And you'll see it go through in Genesis 2 when he creates the tree. He says, listen to my law, do as I tell you, and you will be fruitful. Good things will come to you if you do as I do. And I think you brought up the point of purpose earlier. I think that calls to mind our true purpose. About what God is trying to tell the Israelites here, about what he's trying to tell us here, is why you were created. You weren't just created to rule and to be a part of this big machine that God made. But you were made for the specific purpose of becoming more and more like God. It's as we read all throughout the New Testament, to become more like Jesus, to follow God. I'll finish on this verse here in Romans 8:29, because I think it sums up what is being told here. Romans 8, verse 29. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. From the first day of creation, from our first breath of life, God followed that plan. That isn't something that Paul just throws out there in Romans as this new idea. It is from the very first things that God tells us that we were made in his image, and we were predestined to be in his likeness, to be like him. And so that will do us for our time for today. Thank you very much for your participation.